All right, time to introduce the next project, Assignment 7. Assignment 7 is called 3 Layers of Depth. And here are my instructor demos from last semester. This is just one way you can kind of see it. So what is a layer of depth? Well, in photography, by using aperture controls, you decide how wide your depth of field is. And if you make that rather small, where you're only recording a few inches or a few feet or even a few millimeters, that's in focus, it allows you, even with just one lens, to paint a depth picture of what you're shooting. So in this case, I am shooting past a foreground and focusing instead on the middle ground. And then the background is just a little bit fuzzy, but basically the middle ground where the computer is and the door are in focus, whereas the foreground is really out of focus. So that forces a depth perspective to us. So we would call this 2 layers of depth. I have a visible foreground and a visible middle ground, right? Middle ground / background. Here, I'm doing the opposite. I'm focused in on the foreground and the background bleeds in focus away. Both of these require a very open aperture, which means a low f-stop, because the f-stop is for the actual mechanism. And I think of F as standing for floor tiles being the doors that make the aperture smaller. So the fewer Fs you have, like an F2, the more openness you have, right? The more Fs you have, the more tiles, like an F16, the more stop down, the smaller your aperture will be, and the more will be in focus. So when we did the panoramic with infinite focus, you tried to use a very stopped down aperture. So everything was sharp. Here you really want to open that aperture wide. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to use macro mode. But macro mode will only be able to get things sharp in focus within about 4 feet of the lens. So that's what I used here. And I got this very dramatic, what's called a focus pull, because it pulls out from the foreground and blurs out of focus very quickly. Now here's the reason. You're going to do at least 3 exposures, really between 3 and 5. And one of those exposures needs to showcase what only photography and film can do, because our human eye cannot do this very well. And that's to showcase 3 layers of depth. So in this, we have 2 layers, foregrounds in focus, backgrounds out of focus. In this, we have 2 layers, foregrounds out of focus, backgrounds in focus. They're distinct from each other. But in this one, you have foreground out of focus. You look past it into the middle ground, and you see these 2 interwoven pair of glasses. The glasses are a nice sharp focus, but even just that lens of those glasses is in focus. And then it immediately goes out of focus again. And that way we are actually making a clear middle ground that's separate from both the background and the foreground. So this is what we call 3 layers of depth. And the way I have students experience it is hold up a hand in front of you, a few feet in front of you, okay? And you can do this. This is an interactive demo now. Focus on your hand and just notice without looking at it what's happening to the background around your hand, like between your fingers.
Blurs.
It's out of focus, it's blurry, but your hand is in sharp focus. Okay, now focus on your background, look through your fingers, and notice that your hand gets all blurry, right? So that's 2 layers of depth. Now put your other hand in between the hand you have up and your face, okay? Focus on the hand that's closest to you, and you'll see you still only have 2 layers of depth, and your other hand is just as blurry as the background. But if you focus on the hand that's in the middle ground, behind the hand that's in front, it can give you a little bit of a headache, but then you will have 3 layers of depth. And you can only get it when the middle ground's in focus, right? So the foreground's out of focus, you're looking past it. The middle ground is in focus, it's nice and sharp, and then the background is out of focus. So that is 3 layers of depth. One of your exposures for this assignment has to have that many layers of depth, clearly distinguishable. There's more to this project though, because the end product is going to be 3 to 5 exposures that you present together. So here are the processed exposures, and they are formatted together, and you can put them together in any way that you like, right? But they are to tell a story. And the limitation on the story is you have to keep the same stuff in each frame. You can change your point of view, you can change your cropping, but your point of view on it, your formatting of it. You see you have landscape and portrait format exposures. But it's always the same scene, right? Just shot different ways. And what you want to do is really explore that scene with your aperture as well, getting us to focus on different aspects of that scene. So, how do we approach this? Well, we start with sketching. And we're going to do focus sketches. And you want to kind of think of what your story is. So let me give you some external inspiration here. How can focus help to tell a story? I'm glad you asked. All right, so here is this fine artist from Japan who does photo plates that are printed on aluminum. And you'll notice that he's shooting the same thing in every picture, right? So he chose 4 exposures. And all he's doing is zooming in slowly. But what's nice about them is he's also focusing on different attributes in each picture. So here he focuses on the bird in the sky. Here he's focused on the branches. And the flowers are very soft. Here he simply zooms in on one branch and the flowers remain really soft. And then eventually he zooms in and focuses on the flower. And so it's basically giving us 4 points of view on the same subject matter. It helps us kind of interpret it differently. And then it's easy to start reading this as a story, saying, okay, this is the setting. You think that the bird is the character that will change through the story, but it's not. Instead, it's the story of single flowers and their experience on this tree, right? And the different points of view reveal that to you. Storytelling can sometimes happen in one photo, right? So here's one of my favorite photojournalist shots, and it's just capturing the Iranian president, the former Iranian president Ahmadinejad at a press conference before he steps up to all these microphones, right? And it looks like, because he's out of focus in the background, it looks like he's stressed out, he doesn't like this experience, and so it tells the story of like these two things in opposition to each other. Like the burden of all of that world media and whatever he's going to have to say. And it does that with depth of field. This is one, and these are not mine, but this is a professional that I think wasted an opportunity. It's a fashion layout. They had this idea of let's put her in the dress, let's give her Minnie Mouse ears, and shoot her at a theme park at Disneyland, but she's going to be miserable, right? So there's a contrast there. It's a fun concept. The only missed opportunity here is that it doesn't make use of aperture at all. Because everything's in crisp focus, it doesn't have that extra layer of intention, of what part of the story is most interesting. So here, I would probably leave it as is, if I was the art director, where the background's all in focus. That's the establishing shot, tells you where you are. But here I would focus on her, and I would let the background be blurry, so it felt more dreamy, and we get more introduced to her. Here I would have her be out of focus, and maybe have the background out of focus, but have this table in focus to show that she's kind of in the environment. And then here, let's see, what would a good 3 layers of depth one be? Actually, this is the best potential for 3 layers of depth. The table would be out of focus, she would be in focus, the background would be out of focus, and then here, the background is slightly out of focus here, I would just amp that up. And I think that would help that whole series. So this is how depth of field works. This is how playing with your aperture works. It depends where you focus. So using the same really open aperture setting, using either aperture priority mode or macro mode, I could shoot these ducks at Brackenridge Park by focusing on them, and I look past all the leaves in the foreground. Or I can simply focus on the leaves in the foreground and let those ducks get really blurry. Now, nothing has changed in those 2 shots except for the aperture setting. And they tell a tremendously different story, right? To take this a little bit further, if I use the right settings and the right amount of zoom and proximity, I could shoot past the leaves, have the ducks in sharp focus, and have this background blurry. And that would be 3 distinct layers of depth. Here's a series I think uses aperture, uses focus, uses zoom, uses environment, and really explores this setting, like the horse in the woods, in the misty woods. And that's a great example of this project, right? But does it ever have 3 layers of depth? No. It has foreground, background, 2 layers of depth. Everything's in focus here. Foreground, background, 2 layers of depth. So where would I put 3 layers of depth? Well, it'd be cool if there was a bush or a tree somewhere in this middle exposure, and we could look past that to reveal the horse, and then the background would also be out of focus. You can test this with your camera, just doing different exposures of the same thing with different apertures, focus locking at different lengths to bring out different aspects. So the foreground in focus here versus the background in focus here. And it's subtle, but it makes a big difference as to what you pay attention to. This is probably my favorite one, just because it's a mannequin in a trash can, but they made it look as eerie and as unsettling as possible, right? And this also shows that not only are you just shooting the same thing, but you're shooting it from different angles, different zooms, different points of view, but you can also augment the lighting. It's really effective here how they have backlighting for this shot. So we really just want to become good storytellers. Now this collection uses miniatures and tells this epic war story, right? And this big panel here, and you're allowed to overlap your frames for this project if you want, kind of comic book format. But we're looking past the grass in the foreground, we're seeing the middle ground in focus, and then the background's out of focus. Right? This shows the same subject matter in the same setting, but it doesn't make any great use of aperture. It doesn't show any kind of emotionality for each frame. And so it's more than just having the people change positions to tell a story. You really want to get into how you shoot it. So this, just by nature of how it's shot, the different angles, the different lighting, the different zooms, it explores the same content in multiple exposures and tells more of a story. Okay, that's the goal. This gets used professionally in fashion photography a lot, trying to evoke a setting. Trying to evoke a feeling just through its use of aperture. There are many ways you can tell a story with shots and with multiple exposures, but we're not talking about long exposures or, in this case, multiple exposures to tell a story. We're talking about just framing it all in one shot. So here is an artist in their studio, but since everything is shot in focus, even though it's well composed and well lit, it doesn't give you as much of an evocative sense of the space as this portrait of Matisse in his studio, shot by Breton. And you have kind of a foreground that you're looking past, and then the artist